So I think when I consider community, I think of it on a macro level. And so what is the population that I'm serving? And in that case, my discipline and background is always couched in special education. Most of the time I'm going into the community, it's to support this idea that all of us have differences, but that we all also have strengths, and to recognize both and capitalize on the areas that we perform best, and then help support the areas that we feel like we have deficits in. I really hope that when we look back on this generation of students, we have adults that are walking around with all types of neurotypical and neurodiverse folks, and they don't recognize each other as different, they just recognize each other as human. But it's also recognizing that we each need each other for different things, and we each play a role in each other's lives. I think in the local community, I like to be hands-on and be present. I'm new to the local community, so it's important for me to get into the schools and meet the teachers and watch the students in their classrooms and provide feedback, mostly because I want to understand what's happening in the Virginia system. And then when I think of myself in the international context, it's a humbling experience. I go into it recognizing that there's a collaboration. So I'm going in trying to understand the context, make sure that the local actors really are engaged and have a part in that narrative building. And then there's an exchange. So what do they need? What can I support providing? And then what can we both learn from one another? Because in a lot of circumstances, I'm learning as much as they are, which is great because I can bring that back here and provide other people perspective. When I worked in Jordan and the West Bank, I worked with refugees in a refugee camp, and they were Palestinians. And the reason I did that was because my dad came from Cuba as a refugee, and my brother-in-law is a Palestinian whose family has lived in the West Bank now for generations. The education of all kids in displaced contexts and kids who are being educated in conflict, that's extraordinarily important. It's an entirely blanketed demographic that generally gets left behind because of conflict or because they have a disability and it's more difficult to reach them. I would encourage everybody, regardless of the discipline that they're studying, to go somewhere else and study it there as well. We all learn from each other in different capacities. So while you may have learned in one vein here, you are going to learn in a completely different vein elsewhere, and it's just based on different systems. And if you can understand how a kid and you as a person can do that, and how multifaceted you are, and how cognitively that load you can bear, and it actually helps accentuate things you're already doing, that's a huge, huge step up in the world. Your life perspective is broadened. You believe in yourself more, there's larger self-efficacy. I really feel like across the board, it makes you a better person. I think it's important to do something well. It's okay to try a lot of different things, but it's important at some point to draw back and reflect and decide, what was it about those experiences that made me not just happy, but made me feel that I was a productive member, that I was fulfilled, that I did something that satiated me. And then say, okay, those are the pockets I'm going to really invest in. And try to do that earlier rather than later, because the more time that you divest spending energy in lots of different venues, the less time you spend actually getting to know what it is that you're going to do for the future. So get to know all the things and then decide, and the reflection piece is hugely important. Decide, okay, I'm passionate about this, and then explore that further. When you have really succinct, measurable goals, and you can say that these are realistic, but they're also ambitious, and you've reached those goals, then you feel really great about what you've done. Come up with something that you feel like is pragmatic, it's still ambitious, but you know that with additional effort you can achieve, and then you create more goals on top of those. You never want to feel static. And that criteria, that high expectation criteria, it continues to move and move and move. So once you've reached that, you don't feel like you've accomplished it all. You feel like there's always something that you could do more. We really want the best all the time, but sometimes that is not feasible in the context, and you have to be comfortable with being completely uncomfortable in where you are. There are going to be times where you are absolutely in over your head, overwhelmed, and you don't know in which directions land. But as long as you felt that way before, and you can draw from that well of experience and knowledge, and you recognize that it will get better, then you're comfortable sitting in that space and just being a sponge and knowing that it will get more positive. You just have to wait and see.